Today is the 30th of January 2015, and I have the honor today of interviewing Jack Skydel at his home at 19 Woodway Road in Stamford. We're doing this on behalf of the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning.
Jack, where were you born?
In Bridgeport, Connecticut,
And what year?
1932.
Jack, were your parents born in Bridgeport?
No.
Do you have any idea where they immigrated from?
Russia.
Both from Russia.
Russia.
Were they married before they came to this country?
No.
And where did they meet? Did you ever hear that story?
Yes. My father came here first, and my mother came a little bit later. I think my father came in 1920, and my mother came in a little later, about 1922 or 23. And they found out after they got here that they were first cousins. My father and my mother are first cousins. And they were married in 1925, and my sister was born in 1926, my older sister. And that's their coming here. And an uncle, my father's brother, that had the store in Bridgeport, systematically brought over the rest of the family. And my mother's family was the Manasevit family. Of course, it was Manischewitz at that time. And when they came, Skydelski became Skydel. And he systematically brought over the rest of his 6 brothers, besides him and my father, to this country. And they were in Ellis Island, and they came, they lived in the Lower East Side for many years until my uncle that was in Bridgeport brought my father and up to Bridgeport, and we lived above the store that he's founded in those days.
What kind of a store was it? What did they...
It was a general, they had ladies' wear, they had men's, and the whole store was no bigger than these 2 rooms. And and we lived, there was 4 apartments above the store, and we lived in those 4 apartments, my uncle and aunt, and my mother, and my father, and then the other 2 were rented. And that through the years, I was born there, and we went to school. I went into grammar school.
Did you go to a public school or?
Public school. Public school. And in the 3rd grade, in 1941, we moved to the north end of Bridgeport, just as the war began. And then my father then was working for my mother's brothers, who were here too. They were cousins, and they had a wholesale dry goods business in downtown Bridgeport. And my father worked for them for a while, and going down the many years later, they opened up 3 or 4 other stores locally, and one of them was the Fairfield store. And my father managed that store for many years. He was working for his brother-in-law, not his brother. And the whole family was involved in these 2 stores. I worked in the East Main Street store as a kid. At 12 years old, I was cashing the registers out at the end of the day, after I came home from school, of course. And it was a growing up amongst a melting pot of people. There was Polish, there was Italian. It was just a beautiful life with all these people. And all these people were my uncle's customers. And he was the kind of man, his customers came first. And he would sit and schmooze with them and talk, and half of them didn't speak English, so he learned a little bit of Italian here and there, and as I did too, you know. And it was just growing up, and of course, about a 1 or 2 or 3 block walk to the synagogue, and near the railroad down the line on East Washington Avenue was a synagogue that all my uncles, the Manasevit brothers, sort of founded that synagogue.
What was the name of the synagogue? Do you recall? Was it Orthodox?
Orthodox, yeah. It was. Right in the
Road of Shalom, was it?
No. This is in Bridgeport, not in the North End. I'm talking about near us. Anyhow, it was, and there was a rabbi that they brought. His name was Pelkovitz, and he was at all the services that all his sermons were in Yiddish. That's when all the kids would go to the park across the street, and we didn't have to listen to it because it bored us, you know. And he was there for many years until the synagogue was closed, and a lot of my uncles were the treasurers, they were the committee chairmen, they watched over the synagogue, and that was growing up. It was just and it was unbelievable.
Did you go to Hebrew school?
I went to Hebrew school there, Talmud Torah, and when we moved to the North End, I went to the Talmud Torah in the North End, on Main Street, off Main Street.
So you were bar mitzvah there?
I was bar mitzvahed there, in the synagogue, not in the North End. I was bar mitzvahed in the synagogue, and after my bar mitzvah, I went to Yiddish school, to Sharlach, you know, because we had an arbiter ring in Bridgeport. And I remember hearing speeches that were the closest thing to communism I ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
Because they were, and it was just and my uncle, the one from the store, would roll up a forwards paper on Sunday mornings, and he did all of us singing Yiddish songs, and he would lead us in Yiddish songs on Sunday morning. And when he came in, he had the paper rolled up in his pocket, he would take it out, and he would lead us. And so I went to both Hebrew school and Yiddish school. I didn't learn much in Yiddish school because I heard it at home, and I don't speak it today, and I don't read it very well, but it was just growing up with two sets of parents that taught us about religion and taught us about speaking Yiddish.
Did your parents keep a kosher home?
Yeah, well, they thought they did.
And did you celebrate the Jewish holidays at home?
Of course. Yes. Of course, walking to the synagogue was not in my parents', you know, they got older and it was a long walk. So my father says, today we're going to walk, but we're going to drive a block away from the shul and we're going to walk to the shul.
Okay.
And then he found out that the rabbi once said to him, you know, you don't have to park a block away because you have a problem walking. So you can park in front of the shul. You know. And he did that for many handicapped people, you know, he told that. So he says, it's important that you be here, never mind how you got here. That's what his philosophy was.
Going back to your bar mitzvah, I mean, today there are such spectacular events. What was your bar mitzvah party like?
Well, let me start with the bar mitzvah in the shul. I did what I had to do in the shul, and after it there was a big, what they call today a kiddush,
Yeah.
and it was pickled herring, and it was a couple of other things with some crackers, and they said a couple of brachas, and they drank a little wine, and good Shabbos, and everybody went home. But the next day, on Sunday, we lived in a 4-room apartment. 4-room, small apartment. And they decided to make me a bar mitzvah party. And in that 4-room apartment, with buckboard tables, with chairs, with everything else, in the bedroom, in the other rooms, my parents gave me a party, which all of this cooking was done by my mother and my aunt, who lived 2 doors away from us. The aunt and uncle that owned the store lived about 2 houses from us. And in that 4-room apartment had to be almost 70 people, including the kids. And that was my bar mitzvah party in the house the next day.
Was your mother working in the store as well?
No,
Oh.
my mother never worked in the store. My father worked for the Manasevich brothers, and he started out on Water Street and in the wholesaler, and then when they went into the Fairfield store, which was originally a house that one of the Manasevich brothers that would live there was put in that store first, and then he passed away, and then I believe they had different people managing it, and then my father went out there, and that's where he ended his life in the store. He was working in the store when he died. So that's what happened to that part of it.
So was the Fairfield store selling the same merchandise,
Oh, yeah.
you know, dry goods, the same as
Basically,
Skydel's?
that's the way it was started out, but it was expanded. It was a much bigger store, and they went into clothing, and later on, and they went into some other things. But the first one was a small store, and it had anything you needed in there, a little bit of everything. Yeah.
So tell us about your education. Did you go further than high school?
No.
Uh,
No, I went into the service, and when
How old were you when you went in service?
Probably 32. I went in did I go in 59? I was in just before the end of the Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
Korean War ended in June, I think, of 50.
I think 51, 52.
No, wait a minute.
No, it was anyway.
Mm.
That's when I went in.
And what
Funny little story I'll tell you about my uncle when I got my greetings. You got one too, right? No, you never
I'm
were.
much younger than you.
So I got my greetings, and I went to my uncle and I said, this was December the 9th, when they wanted me to report to the train station. And I said, Uncle Abe, look at my greetings that I just got. He says, what is it? He says, they drafted me. I have to leave here on December the 9th. He says, you call them up and tell them you can't go. I said, why not? He says, it's before Christmas. I need you in the store. That's the kind of guy he was. He didn't know he was funny. Right?
Where were you stationed when you were in the Army?
Fort Eustis, Virginia.
Yeah. Did you have a specialty? Were you trained in any, do you have an MOS or?
No,
No.
unfortunately, they let me out on the medical.
So how long were you in?
December, about 5 months, 6
Oh,
months.
okay.
6 months.
Mhm. And after you got out of the service, you went back to work in the store?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And did you get married shortly after that?
Got married in 1958.
Mm-hmm. And you were still living in Bridgeport?
Yeah.
And did you have your own apartment or were you living with your parents?
No, I was living with my parents until I got married.
No, so I said when you got married, you had your own apartment.
Oh, yeah.
And let's see. When you were in school or in the store, did you find any anti-Semitism?
Good question. There was a family that was next to the property where the store was. I know their name. Their name was the Fernley family. And they were really like homeless people. I mean, the house was terrible, and it was a ramshackle house. The father would say to me some derogatory thing, Jewish, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he called me a dirty Jew once. And my mother tells a story that when I came home, I said to my sister, "You're a dirty Jew." And my mother said, "What?" She says, "Well, the man down the street called me a dirty Jew, so I guess sister," I used to call her sister, "sister is a dirty Jew too." Well, my father went crazy. And he went over there and gave him what for, and that was the end of it. That's about the only time I ever ran into any anti-Semitism. There were some people that used to make remarks as you walk by on the street, and I just kept going, and nobody started any fuss over it.
Was there a large Jewish population in Bridgeport when you were growing up?
Not on the east side. On the east side, we were the first people there, and there was a melt. There was Greeks, there was Polish, there was Italian, and a lot of things. My uncle hired a little boy, 9 years old, came in. He says, "I need to work." He said, my father died and my mother needs the money." He says, this is the way he was. He says, "I need a job." So my uncle says, "What can you do?" So he says, well, first of all, he says to the little kid, "You're going to come here after school, and you're going to do your homework first, and then you're going to come here, and I'll find a little job for you." So he put him to work to sweep the floors, to put stock in the shelf or something. And that young boy thought that my uncle was his father after a while, because he just came very close. His name was LaMotta, Joe LaMotta. No, not to the boxer. And when the store closed in 1989, I think, when the store closed after 70 years, it was 70 years on the same corner, but it mushroomed from that little store to an addition that had a ladies' department, and it was a department store. And in the back, they systematically bought up houses that faced the back. And when it started, they had room for about 2 cars back there. When it closed, they had room for over 300 cars in the parking lot. And it just grew over those 70 years. Today, the buildings are not even there, all torn down.
Were there other Jewish merchants in the area, in the downtown?
On where we moved to the east, to the north end,
Yeah.
there was a store by the name of Nidens. Nidens was the same business. And Mr. Niden and my uncle, up the street from us was a Scotchman by the name of, I forget his name, had a little store. And we used to exchange things. He needed a size in a shirt or something. They all would meet on Sunday mornings in the wholesaler that my uncles had, and they would buy up what they need. So they sold cases of merchandise. You know,
This was in Bridgeport, the wholesaler?
oh yeah, it was right across the street from the railroad station. And they met there. They would schmooze. They would go to lunch to the delicatessen around the corner, and then they would share a case of stuff. One time, my uncle, somebody said to my uncle, she says, I need a case of some of those socks. So he says to him, but I can't afford it this week. You know, they pay cash for everything. There was no such thing. And he said to him, all right, he says, give him the half a case, and I'll take the other half. And he says to the guy, when you sell it, you'll pay me for it.
The good old days.
That was the good old days. They were friends. Yeah.
You want to talk a bit about your family? After you were married,
Yes.
were you involved in any Bridgeport Jewish activities? Did you belong to the Jewish Center?
Yes. I didn't belong to the Jewish Center, but I did go to the center periodically and played a little basketball. That didn't last too long. Later on, I became, and somebody talked me into joining B'nai B'rith. And I was the president of our lodge. Involved a lot of our friends, we all were involved. We did programs, we did all kinds of things, and we supported the state of Israel. And I remember we were running a fundraiser for the state of Israel, and the woman who was the executive director of the center, or the federation that we call it today, was Clara Stern, her name was. And she was the sister of Golda Meir. And we talked to her about bringing her sister to Bridgeport. She said, I don't know, I'll see what I can do. And we were arranging this fundraiser so that the night of the fundraiser that we had a program and we had a dinner or something. And I come early because I'm on the committee to do this, and I see this little lady standing at the door, and I walked over and I said, are you waiting for somebody? She says, I'm waiting for my sister. her sister was Golda Meir's sister. And I said, oh, well, would you like to sit down? She says, no, I'll wait here. And little did I know, that's who I was talking to. And whenever she came here, I'll tell you a funny story about it. Whenever she came here, her sister would bring her to the store on East Main Street because she loved the slippers. Daniel Green or something was the name of the slippers. And she would buy a pair of slippers. Fast forward to when my son was involved at Road of Shalom with, and they were on a trip to Israel. Now she's the prime minister by now, right? And she had all these kids in the room, and she wanted to know what their name was. So it comes to him, he said, my name is Seth Skydel. She says, my slippers come from your store. Can you imagine a mind on a woman that would remember that after all those years?
Going back to the store, when you mentioned this young boy that came in and needed a job, Joe Lamata,
Yeah.
did he fit in? I mean, it sounds like he was an Italian.
I'll tell you about Joe Lamata. My uncle was learning a little bit of Italian from all the Italian customers. So, Joe Lamata, let me back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
And he was learning English. So that Joe used to talk to him in English, and he would talk to him in Italian. Yeah, and he, let's go back to the synagogue. Now, he spoke a little Yiddish, and he doesn't look, Italian people are Semitic. Whenever they needed a minion at the synagogue, they used to send Joe Lamata over there, because he would go over there, and later on he would take me, with him, because they were short, a couple of people. And fast forward to the end of the store's existence. He left the store while he was the men's clothing buyer. And that's how he ended the conditions of the store.
So he taught your uncle some Italian.
Yeah.
Did your uncle teach him Yiddish?
I tell you, he spoke many, many different words in Yiddish, He understood more than he spoke, because he heard my uncle talking to my aunt and to some of the others, that came into the store. That was...
You mentioned your son and Golda Meir. We didn't talk about how many children did you have?
I had 3.
And boys, girls, how did it?
I had a son and 2 daughters.
And where are they now?
Were they what?
I say, are they in the area now? Do you?
Oh, yes. My daughters are in West Hartford, and my son is in Cheshire.
And when you were married, did your wife work in the store?
No, she was she's a nurse at Bridgeport Hospital.
And how did it come about meeting Barbara?
After I was divorced from my wife, Barbara came along and we met through a mutual friend.
I mean, you were in Bridgeport, and it seems to me that What Barbara tells me, she was from,
But the friends of mine in Bridgeport are connected to her family through her husband. Has a sister that lived in Queens and married to a childhood friend of Barbara's.
mhm.
Right?
Yep. Yep.
And how long have you been married to Barbara?
20. How's it? I can't remember.
Well, actually,
Give a number.
20. Oh, 20. Yeah,
Over 20 years was.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's over 20.
And did you always live right here in Stanford?
No.
When you were married.
Oh,
No, when you married Barbara?
Yes, yes.
Have you been in this location for all that time?
Yes.
Mhm.
I lived in an apartment for a while in Bridgeport until I met Barbara and then
Yeah.
we moved here.
Was there any particular reason why you selected Stanford?
Well, Barbara has relatives here, number one.
Mhm.
Number two, from Bridgeport to Jackson Heights, this is halfway in between.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right?
So, did you have any hobbies? Did you have anything in your spare time that you enjoyed doing, or were you always worried about the business?
Bowling.
Bowling? Mhm.
Yeah, I was a bowler. Can't bowl anymore.
Yeah. We both have seen so many technology changes in our lifetime. Is there one particular thing that you enjoy that has made a difference in your life? Like a computer or an iPhone or?
We both hate computers.
Yeah,
No, I'll tell you what made a difference in my life. Barbara.
great. And do you have any particular advice for the younger generation growing up now as to what their outlook on life should be?
The younger generation today are so absorbed into these electronic gizmos that they don't know how to sit and have a conversation without those in their hand. And that bothers us, both of us, it bothers us. Even our grandchildren, they don't make a move without those iPods, and they're texting each other and they're sitting in the same seat.
Yeah. How many grandchildren do you have between you?
Well, I have 2, 3, 5,
Barbara?
and Barbara has 2.
Mhm. And they all have the iPods and the iPhones,
Oh.
iPhone.
They start when they're very young.
Yeah. So there's a lack of verbal communication, is what you're saying.
A lot of times there is.
When I think about the Historical Society, we're also losing written documents because nobody writes a letter anymore.
No. Or they don't call up on the phone. They send you an email.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
I don't think so. I've had a good life, a long run, and I think let's just be well and keep going.
Yeah. You involved in the Jewish community locally? What are your, I know you've been involved with the Jewish Historical Society. Are you involved with any other Jewish community events?
Not really.
Mhm.
Not really.
The JCC film,
yeah.
Well, that's the film festival, yeah. But
the
that's
library.
that's the base for all of this is for the center.
Hello.
You could sit
Barbara is joining the conversation here.
When I met Jack, I asked him what he did for a living. And he said to me, I do windows. I said, oh, that's great. I love clean windows. He said, no, not that kind of windows. I decorate windows.
Yeah.
And we've had a very good life together. We've traveled. We've enjoyed our grandchildren together. One of my grandchildren lives down the block. And we also have two nieces that we're very close to that are here often. And it's wonderful to have young people in our lives.
Well, thank you both, Jack and Barbara. It's been a pleasure spending this time with you, and you will get a copy of this interview to share with all your family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay well.
I was saying that
World War II.
World War II in Bridgeport, we were constantly in blackouts and air raids because we were highly industrialized, and we were making Singer's sewing machine was making uniforms for the soldiers. Remington Arms was making armament. Sikorsky was working on a helicopter, and in that plant they were making aircraft. And you heard the song Rosie the Riveter? All the women were riveting those planes together because all the men were in the war. And they were making the Corsair for the Navy in Stratford at what is now, it was AFCO like Clownwing or something in those days. And we had all in the store, we had all these workers that were working in the factories, Polish people, and we were selling safety shoes. You know what those are? They have a metal cup on the top so that nothing falls on your toes. And they would come into the store and buy whatever they needed for these, and people were making big dollars in those days. There was an influx from the South on every time I think of cattle cars, you know, I think of the Holocaust. But these people were coming from the South to Bridgeport because there was work and they made a lot of money. And my father was an air raid warden for our street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they gave him a helmet and a flashlight, and he was walking up and down to tell people to pull their shades down. We had lit, on the front of the car, they would have a thing to block the light of the headlights from up above in case there was an attack, you know. And we grew up with General Electric, all the major...
Yeah, when Bullards was there, my dad worked at Bullards.
Bullards.
Vertical turret lathes.
Yeah, and we had McKesson and Robbins Pharmaceutical that was producing pharmacy things for the soldiers.
Bridgeport Brass was big.
Bridgeport Brass was big, yeah, and they were both in Waterbury and in Bridgeport. And there's down at Seaside Park, which the whole city was historically P.T. Barnum. Because P.T. Barnum was the mayor of the city in the 1800s. And Bridgeport Hospital was founded by P.T. Barnum. He was the president of the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
One of my kids, there's a plaque in the hospital to this day. So one of my kids said to me one day, P.T. Barnum was the president of the hospital? Just, Was he the president when you were born? Thank you very much. But there's a whole history. In fact, I have in the car, which I'm going to bring to the archives, is an old photo thing about Bridgeport with the landmarks and everything. I have it in the car. I'm going to bring it into the archives today.
Do you have any pictures of the Skydels or the Fairfield store?
There is some, just a piece of the store, but there's some newspaper articles and what the store looked like down the road. But not-
Well, we should have that.
Yeah, I have to get together a lot of stuff from Bridgeport that I'm gonna put into the archives.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, and it was, we had walking distance from the store, we had 2 movie theaters, you know, and most of the dishes in my mother's kitchen came from the movie theaters.
Giveaways.
Yeah. And it really was just a wonderful, there was a little restaurant, we used to go there for lunch, and they would talk to the competitors, they would talk to the customers. It was just nice growing up.
Jack, tell the snowsuit story.
Yeah, that's the story. My uncle, when it came to kids, it was the dead of winter, and a customer comes in with a man and a little boy, and he wants to buy a jacket, a winter jacket. So he helps him with the winter jacket, and as he's wrapping it up, the little boy is standing over there waiting for him. And he says, terrible weather for your son to be out in today, and he's wearing that flimsy little jacket. He says he should be having a snowsuit, because there was always snow on the ground in those days in the winter. And he says, I know, he says, he really needs it, but I can't afford it. He says, go over there and pick out a snowsuit. When you've got the money, you'll pay me. And he gives him the snowsuit and puts it in a bag, and they leave. He never heard from that man. He never came back. He was probably ashamed that he could never afford to pay for it. Down the road, many, many years, I was already working in the store. I was for years. And now my uncle had passed away at age 68. And in fact, one of my daughters is named for him. And and now his 2 son-in-laws are running the business. And he said, so one day the older son-in-law comes to me and he says, Ben Siegel, you know Ben.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to me, I got this letter. I want you to read it. And I don't know what to do with the check that's in the letter. He opens it up, and there's a check with a letter telling him, I can't remember the name of the owner of your business, but he was very nice to me, and he tells a story about the snowsuit. And I just wanted to let you know how nice it was and what a man he was. So Ben comes to me with this check. It was for $100. And he says to me, what do I do with this check? He read the letter anyway. And I said, let me think about it. So I went out to lunch, and I came back, and I said, you know what you're going to do? You're going to cash the check, and you're going to send a check to the Newington Children's Hospital. That's what we did.
Mm-hmm. Very nice story. Pleasant memory of the,
A lot of memories, a lot of memories.
yeah. You don't see that happening today.
Well, I can't remember what I said this morning, but I can remember what happened 50 some odd years ago.
Well, thank you again, Jack.
Thank you.
Thanks.